In every country in the world, cola dominates. We feel that we have to plant our flag everywhere, even before the Christians arrive. Cola's destiny is to inherit the earth.
The Cold War is finally over. The Soviet Empire has fallen. And a new war is being waged.
Холодную войну кто выиграл?
Who has won the Cold War?
По-моему, понятно.
I think it's clear.
Вот, например, сейчас в городе, вот в Москве.
Nowadays,
идешь
you
по
walk through the
Москве
streets
и
of
думаешь,
Moscow,
где ты находишься? В Москве, в России.
and you wonder where you are.
Ленин как раз говорил о том,
Lenin
что
always said we should take the best from the West. Not only the best food and drinks, but the best ideas, the best conceptions.
продуктов питания и напитков, а вообще во многом брать лучшее. А так, я не думаю, что
I don't think he would be too happy to see our stores overflowing with Coca Cola, Pepsi Cola, and other such stuff.
и прочими, всякими прочими.
In 1985, the Coca-Cola Company, which has shunned Russia throughout the Cold War, comes to Moscow. Coke is not alone.
Morning. Oz, please, I'd like to trim the ceiling, and I'd like to go...
For years, PepsiCo has been the only cola company in Russia, but it knows a war is coming.
Nigel, where do you want people standing?
Green passes through the tunnel there, please.
Do you know if any of the celebrities are here yet? Cindy is 5 minutes away. Okay.
Pepsi's counterattack doesn't come right away, but when it does, it's big and bold and blue.
The cola wars, if we can call them that, and what cola wars and the market wars of the modern global economy represent are really a new phenomenon.
I'd like to welcome those members of the international media who've traveled from some 30 countries. Today marks one of the most significant moments in the history of the Pepsi-Cola enterprise.
We do indeed have a new look for Pepsi, a powerful new look that's part of a sweeping initiative we call Project Blue. An initiative that we believe defines how the cola wars will be fought and won in the 21st century.
This way, Cindy. Cindy, keep us away, please. Cindy.
What these new cola wars do is to diminish our fundamental choices by the extension of invisible monopolies, new sets of needs, new sets of goods for those needs. The conqueror is conquering, not by killing bodies, but by winning over souls.
As America recovers from the Great War, the battle between Coke and Pepsi is not much of a fight. Pepsi is near bankruptcy, while Coca-Cola is bought for $25 million by an austere tycoon named Ernest Woodruff. It should be a good time for companies that bottle pleasure for a nickel, but it isn't. Coke and Pepsi are mostly sugar water, and the price of sugar is skyrocketing. Against the elder Woodruff's objections, Coca-Cola hires his son Robert to take over the company. Lucky for Coca-Cola, Robert Woodruff molds Coke into what one journalist calls the sublimated essence of America. Robert Woodruff, just 33, is the youngest head of a major American corporation. Both loved and feared, he is known simply as the boss. At his plantation, Itchaway, in southern Georgia, he often entertains politicians and industrialists. Later, they will be valuable to Coca-Cola. More importantly, Coca-Cola will be valuable to them.
This is my favorite picture of him because he was a person who loved the plantation. It was the place that he liked to go to be restored.
In short order, Robert Woodruff restores Coca-Cola to full health. He is less successful at restoring his relationship with his ever-doubting father.
You may have heard before that there was sort of a rivalry between Mr. Robert and his father. He disapproved of the way Mr. Robert spent money. So on his first visit down to Itchaway, Mr. Roberts said, "Pa, would you like a piece of this plantation?" And he said, "No, I'll get it soon enough." Then Mr. Roberts said, "Well, how do you figure that?" He said, "I'll buy it at the sheriff's sale."
The sheriff's sale never happens.
People developed fanatical loyalties to Robert Woodruff. Even though he didn't say much, people became adept at interpreting his grunts. And he seemed to have a real intuition as to making brilliant business decisions. He had aphorisms that seemed so obvious. One of my favorite is almost pure poetry. He said, "Coca-Cola should always be within an arm's reach of desire." In other words, you should be able to reach out wherever you are and you grab a Coke. I mean, here's the Coke that I've been drinking during this interview.
The 20s are a period of rapid growth for Coke and tumultuous change for America. People are once again enjoying life. More significantly for Coca-Cola, they have wheels.
Woodruff saw you have to have the service station be a place where people can stop and get Coca-Cola. And it was like a wonderful endless do loop. You go to fill up on gas and on Coke, and then you have to stop again for gas and to go to the bathroom and fill up on more Coke.
We were always thinking about his business. One time coming back from Itchaway, we stopped to get a Coca-Cola at a filling station, and we missed him, and we found him around outside scratching through the garbage to see what percentage of Coca-Cola was in the bottle tops.
Woodruff likes what he sees. With Prohibition in force, the garbage cans of America overflow with Coke caps. Then, in the midst of the Great Depression, Prohibition ends. But sales of Coca-Cola still soar. The 5-cent drink is a welcome tonic to demoralizing unemployment and bread lines. In good times or bad, it seems, Coke can't lose.
Pepsi had only become a real competitor for Coca-Cola after they had begun bottling it in 12-ounce recycled beer bottles and selling it for a nickel during the Depression. The trouble is, it was regarded as a second-class drink for poor people, so that in Canada, when people looked down on French Canadians, they called them Pepsis. In the South, Pepsi was known as the nigger drink because black people drank Pepsi.
On Woodruff's plantation, everyone drinks Coke. He treats his black workers well, and they revere him. But Coca-Cola is a Southern company. There aren't even black salesmen. And while many blacks drink Coke, they are rarely seen in Coke ads. When they are, the image is predictable. In 1936, Woodruff attends the Berlin Olympics. The big event this year is the 100-yard dash, featuring a black American named Jesse Owens.
Stands is Wyckoff. Metcalf comes up, but Owens wins in 10.3.
Owens sets a world record, but that's not the only American victory. The stands are full of spectators drinking Coca-Cola. After the race, Woodruff is entertained by the Nazi elite. He is aware of Hitler's politics, but Woodruff is above all a pragmatic man. His politics are Coca-Cola.
The German business for Coca-Cola did very well, mostly because of a German named Max Keitt. He was not ever a member of the Nazi Party, but in fact, Nazi headquarters was one of his prime consumers. One of his competitors went to New York and toured a Coca-Cola bottling plant and very quietly grabbed some bottle caps that had the kosher sign on them. He brought them back to Germany and he had little postcards printed up showing this bottle cap saying, Coca-Cola is a Jewish American drink. It's run by Harold Hirsch, this Jew, and good Nazis should not drink it. Max Keitt begged Robert Woodruff to remove Hirsch from the board. And Woodruff, I think to his great credit, refused to do that and told them that they just were going to have to overcome this by positive advertising. That accounts in some regard for why Max Keitt went out of his way to court the Nazis.
At Coca-Cola bottling conventions, swastikas drape the halls along with the Coke logo. Even after the outbreak of war, Coca-Cola continues selling soft drinks to the Nazis until Pearl Harbor finally makes business with Germany impossible.
Oh, dear. What are you worrying about now, Larry? Do you know the United States is at war? Do you realize the government is rationing sugar?
I did see something about it in the headlines.
I don't know what the world's coming to.
Are you worrying about the world or just the sugar shortage?
Both. We'll never survive this war. Coca-Cola, the country, or any of us.
Within days of Pearl Harbor, Woodruff promises that every man in uniform will get a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents, whatever it costs the company. General Eisenhower, a Coke drinker himself, orders bottling plants to be shipped overseas. And a remarkable relationship between Coke and America begins.
They commissioned Coca-Cola men without having them join the Army. They gave them Army uniforms. They called them technical observers, which was a designation formerly reserved only for people who fixed tanks or something, because Coca-Cola was supposed to be an essential morale booster for the troops.
When the Americans landed at Anzio in World War II, the first bottle of Coca-Cola ashore was shared by 17 GIs. And these letters that come from American soldiers to their families saying, one of the things I'm fighting for is the right to drink Coca-Cola. So you can see how a making over of feeling in a nationalist context becomes associated with products. Over 60 Coca-Cola bottling factories were established. In fact, 3 Coca-Cola technicians were killed in combat. So the Coke went with the troops wherever the troops went.
Landing in the beach in Normandy, a soldier that was shot to pieces had managed to crawl to the beach and was dying there in the sand on the beach that night. And in trying to get up out of the water further, his hand hit something. And then in the darkness, he felt it, and it was a bottle of Coca-Cola, empty bottle. Later on, when they found the guy, he said it reminded him of home. It's the only thing that kept him from dying all night long, was sitting there holding on to that bottle of Coca-Cola.
The war makes Coca-Cola a worldwide symbol of freedom and the American way of life. Entering the Eisenhower era, Coca-Cola has become the preeminent American drink.
After the war, Eisenhower had this incredible popularity. And Robert Woodruff and his cronies became good friends with him and decided that they would run him for president. And in fact, Woodruff told someone at the time, he said, well, we sent Ike overseas to give him international experience. We brought him back, made him the president of Columbia University to please the eggheads, and now we're just trying to figure out whether to run him as a Republican or a Democrat.
With running mate Nixon aboard, the Eisenhower bandwagon rolled to smashing victory across the land. America and the free world look for leadership to a citizen for whom free government is a deeply felt religious faith.
Wherever you go throughout America today, you will find an inviting new look in structures of every kind. Americans are building at what almost seems a fever pitch. Today's marketplace is an everyday and exciting festival, with every color in the rainbow.
Coca-Cola likes to say that it's only selling soft drinks. But nowadays, to sell any product, you have to sell a lot more than the product, because to some degree, what you have to do is fabricate a need for the product you're selling. Anyone who wants to sell colas has to sell an image, a way of life, in order to sell its products.
The Coca-Cola Company proudly presents the most famous family in America.
Here, have a Coke and cheer up.
That's the best idea yet.
Commentators on the soft drink business used to talk about Coke as the living room brand and Pepsi as the kitchen brand. And it's because Pepsi took a long time to become a real alternative to Coke. So what people would literally do is if they were having friends over in their living room, they'd always make sure it was the Coke bottle that was sitting there. But for themselves, if they liked Pepsi, they'd go into the kitchen and sneak a glass of Pepsi Cola. So Pepsi wasn't quite respectable to be served to friends.
And now, before rejoining Annie Get Your Gun, here's a word from...
In the early 50s, Pepsi decides it's had enough of the kitchen.
Just a minute, sir. You wouldn't leave while I'm talking to you, would you? Well, it's all right. This isn't really a commercial. This is a Pepsi-Cola refreshment intermission.
Pepsi offers status-conscious Americans the good life, which they can purchase, still at a cheaper price than Coke. Then, on the other side of the ocean, events happen which threaten not only Pepsi's place in the living room, but the living room itself.
This is the land of communist tyranny. Along its frontier, any people, any nation may be in danger. The next aggression may come from any point along this line. Do you see how aggressive communism threatens our freedom?
The cornerstone for fighting for peace and winning the peace is the strength of America. Our economic strength sustains it from getting overrun by atheistic communism.
In 1959, there was an exhibition between the United States and the Soviet Union. And the State Department went to Coca-Cola first to get them to be part of the exhibition, and they wouldn't do it because they were afraid of the reaction here in domestic market. And I decided that when they asked me to do it, that we would do it because I was going to make sure that what happened in Europe was not going to happen in Eastern Europe, that we'd be the first one in.
Vice President Nixon escorts Soviet Premier Khrushchev on a preview of the United States Fair at Skolniki Park in Moscow. It's the official opening of the American Exposition and dedicated to showcasing the high standard of life in our country.
For a brief instant in 1959, there was a refreshing pause in East-West tension. America proudly exhibits the benefits of capitalism. And thirsty Russians find a cold Pepsi is a lot more enticing than a Cold War.
Nixon was over there, who was then during Eisenhower's time when he was vice president. And I told Nixon that I had to get a Pepsi in Khrushchev's hands or I was going to be in a lot of trouble. The next day, I had the famous kitchen debate.
Every aspect of the Cold War and Soviet-American rivalry is argued. Says Mr. K, the Soviet will overtake America and then wave bye-bye.
After that, Nixon brought them by our kiosk. Then I told him I wanted him to try a Pepsi that was made in New York and then a Pepsi that we'd made in Moscow to show him that we could make the same quality drink in Moscow that we could in New York. And so he tried them both and immediately turned to everybody and said the one in Moscow was a much better drink. And our advertising campaign at the time was "Be sociable, have a Pepsi." So there were pictures all around the world in all the newspapers showing Khrushchev drinking a Pepsi, and the headline over it was "Khrushchev learns to be sociable."
Be sociable, look smart.
In 1960, Richard Nixon loses the presidential race to Kennedy. 3 years later, Don Kendall wins the presidency of PepsiCo. Kendall sees an opportunity for Pepsi and hires Nixon as the company lawyer. Then he starts grooming Nixon for another presidential bid. In 1961, without warning, Khrushchev erects the Berlin Wall. Democracy is shut out of the Soviet Union, and so are Pepsi and Coke.
There are some who say that communism is the wave of the future. Let them come to Berlin. Freedom is indivisible. And when one man is enslaved, all are not free.
In America in 1960, no man is enslaved, but many are not free.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn around.
Then one day, 4 black students sit at a lunch counter and order a Coke. Within weeks, students throughout the South are demanding the same, and the sit-in is born.
It was on February the 13th, and we had the very first sit-in here in Nashville. And I took my seat at the counter. I asked the waitress for a hamburger and a Coke.
I said, "I'm sorry, our management does not allow us to serve niggers in here."
When students all over the South started sitting in at lunch counters, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream and taking the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence.
The American dream is sometimes grand. Sometimes it can be had for a nickel. To many whites, Coke is America. To many blacks, it represents everything America has denied them. The Coca-Cola Company, for its part, has not changed since Robert Woodruff took command 40 years ago. It still has no black board members, still has no black salesmen.
So as a result of this, we're asking you tonight to go out and tell your neighbors not to buy Coca-Cola.
In the South, in the days of the Civil Rights Movement, when we struggled to raise funds to support our cause, there were very few white business people who supported us. This has been something that has taken place more recently, after Martin Luther King's time, when they realized that there was a growing power economically in the black community, that we understood if we bought their products that we had to be treated with respect. We had to call a boycott against one or two companies, but the word got out, and all the companies then decided to comply. Then we went on to the bottling companies. We didn't have to go very far before the bottling companies also complied in upgrading black people and hiring new people and so on to our satisfaction.
Coca-Cola was trapped in a Southern mentality for a while. But Robert Woodruff realized if Atlanta and if Coca-Cola appeared to be racist and appeared to be backwards looking, that they were going to lose business, and that they had a huge consumer audience in African Americans. And so Robert Woodruff was very instrumental in leading Atlanta peacefully into an integrated era. They hired Charles Boone, who was a very impressive man. He had a deep, booming voice. In fact, he was mistaken for Martin Luther King, which irritated him no end because he didn't want to rock the boat like that. He was trying to be, he was a good Coca-Cola man. And he had to go through hell.
Charlie Bottoms, the white salesman assigned to show Charles Boone around, quickly learns what it means to be black in the South.
Went to Macon, Georgia, and I'd call the bottler, and he says, be sure to come in the back door, or the side door would be better, because there's a restroom back there. Dang. Anyway, I brought him in through the back door, and all the blacks in the plant saw us coming in, and I knew them all, and I motioned to them, and they all lined up like a receiving line, and every single one of them met Charlie Boone, and the manager was sitting there looking out the glass window about to die, because I was doing that, and we finally got up to his office there and sat down. He says, what were you doing? We were saying hello to everybody, and I was introducing Charles Boone. He turned around to Charles Boone and says, what I call you? And he says, you call me Charles or Charles Boone? No, I don't mean that. He says, what do you mean? He said, do I call you Negro, nigger, or what?
At 7:10 this evening, Martin Luther King was shot in Tennessee. Martin Luther King, 20 minutes ago, died.
Robert Woodruff happened to be in the White House when Lyndon Johnson got the word. And he turned from President Johnson. By the way, they were drinking together is what they were doing. He was very good buddies with Lyndon Johnson. He said, excuse me, I have to call Ivan Allen in Atlanta. He called the mayor of Atlanta, and he said, we have to do things right. I'm going to send the Coca-Cola plane to pick up Coretta King and bring her back to Atlanta.
Mr. Woodruff said to him, Ivan, in the next few days, the eyes of the world will be on Atlanta, and I don't want you to leave a stone unturned. Anything that you need, we will provide for you, because the funeral was to take place, and we knew a lot of people would be coming into Atlanta from all around the world. And so Woodruff provided the money to the city for whatever they needed to take care of the crowd.
While the rest of America burns, Atlanta mourns Martin Luther King in relative peace. And the Coca-Cola Company will never be the same. As Black America screams its rage, Russians trapped behind the Iron Curtain barely speak above a whisper.
All political conversations in the 60s and 70s invariably took place in the kitchen, accompanied by tea and vodka. And Coke, if it sometimes happened to be on the table, would enlighten everything around it like a star coming from the other half of the world.
For many, Coca-Cola may be the symbol of freedom, but Pepsi has its eyes on a different prize. In 1971, Richard Nixon, now president, repays an old debt and sends the head of Pepsi to the Soviet Union on a trade mission. Pepsi comes away with a monopoly that will last for more than a decade, about the time it takes for the old Russia to die.
Но вот представьте себе
полный зал людей,
Imagine a supermarket full of people, and there is nothing on the shelves.
фасованную колбасу или фасованное мясо, и вот это вот
Sliced sausage is brought out,
огромное количество
and a
людей
flood of people rush to get a piece of meat.
наваливается и прыгают вот на
You could
на
not
эту
look at this without tears.
Это была жуткая картина, на которую без
It's
слез
wonderful we
нельзя.
are so far from this picture
И
now.
очень хорошо, что мы от этого ушли.
In the late 80s, an economic revolution sweeps through Russia. With glasnost comes abundance for some, and competition for Pepsi.
I graduated Moscow Energy Institute, engineer of optics and laser. But as a lot of Russian people my age, I didn't start to work on my specialty because, you know, Russian market, you know, right now doesn't need engineer brains. Maybe they need, but they don't pay good money. So it was a dream for me to find a job in a big company. And I'm not an old babushka, old dedushka, you know, so I have a time to learn. Pepsi Cola tried to find a driver. So I decided, okay, it's a good chance for simple man. Maybe they tell me, okay, Andrew, you can stay in Pepsi and in 1-2 years take another job. 20 years ago, we had only Pepsi, you know, and Russian soft drinks. So if you don't have competition, it means you not work very hard, you know. But right now, we have a lot of, you know, enemy.
Young Russians are Pepsi's frontline troops in its Big Blue campaign. In the past, they would have gone into the military. Now the money is in the cola wars.
In my brain, Coca-Cola is a very strong competitor. And every moment I remember, if I will not make a good job, they will be tougher than me, than my company. So I always remember that we have to be best. The main idea, Coca-Cola, you know, have to be on the second place. Maybe it's a good company, but they have to be under us. In the United States, this game has a name, word.
When free enterprise came in and also gave the opportunity for our competition to move in, that's when the game got really exciting. The Coke-Pepsi rivalry explodes the consumption inside the market. So now our objective is, instead of a Russian drinking one bottle, he'll get closer to Western European standards with the goal of ultimately getting up to the 8 or 9 bottles that an American drinks. In a short period of time, we'll be able to have an ice-cold Pepsi within a hand's reach of every Russian consumer.
You're quoting Robert Woodruff, a Coca-Cola guy.
I know. He says an arm's reach,
That's right.
I said a hand's reach. I'd say now free enterprise is in, the Cold War is over, and the cola wars have just begun. We also know as we move into the 90s that we need to keep ourselves on the leading edge. So this April, we launched Pepsi Blue. And we targeted our new Pepsi Blue campaign against teens.
Привет, это время Pepsi. Итак,
Hi, this is Pepsi time. The most important super story is out. Today we will finally find out why Cindy Crawford has come to Russia.
Hello, Cindy.
Привет, Россия. I'm here to introduce new Pepsi Blue. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.
Yes, yes, yes. Pepsi has changed its color. The taste is of course the same, but not the color.
Круто.
Cool. Nice. Neat.
Well, I think Russia looks at its past and sees red. We're counting on Russia to look forward and see blue.
Forget the past. Go outside and have a blast.
Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola will argue happily, hey, this is great. People have a choice of 2 colas. You might say the ability to choose a Pepsi or a Coke is a real choice, but I'd say that unless you have a choice of other beverages or drinking just plain water or no beverages at all, you don't really have very meaningful choice.
It's May Day in Russia, and the communists are marching to an old tune. For many, capitalism promised something substantial, but delivered fast food. Good for a quick fix, but it doesn't fill your belly.
The Russian people are crying out that they've turned our Russia into dirt. We can't afford Coke and Pepsi. We need them, but we can't afford them.
Before Coca-Colization of Russia, we had some Russian soft drinks. When become privatization, your guys came and they took over almost all factories of Russian soft drinks. Could you imagine? We gave up to produce Russian soft drinks, and many people are longing, but new generation already forgot about existence of many traditional Russian drinks. For instance, there is one Russian national drink, kvass. It's a beautiful drink. We use this kvass not only as soft drink, but some part of cold soups, etc. And it's tradition that for 5 centuries they closed all factories of kvass. It's absolutely almost impossible to find kvass in Russia.
Does anybody here drink kvass?
Yes.
When
we can find it.
Oh, it's hard to find. Huh?
Right now it is.
Who drinks Pepsi Cola?
Everybody.
Who drinks Coca Cola?
Everybody.
It's just what's available, or do you choose?
If we had a bottles like Coca-Cola with glass, I would buy it, but...
Does everybody feel that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this patriotic?
No, we just missed it. I haven't seen it for like 5 years or so, you know, it's just gone. Before you could buy it like anywhere in the street, but now all you see is Coca-Cola.
One of the great dangers of modern consumer culture, global American pop culture, and the corporate interests it advances is that it makes a kind of soft war on the individual and distinctive souls of different nations. The Russian soul also is about Russian goods, doing things the Russian way. Selling Coca-Cola, selling Big Macs, selling Reeboks is about getting Russians to act like youth all over the world. That means if you want to sell those goods, you've got to persuade Russians it's not such a great thing to be Russian and hark back to some antiquarian Russian soul. You've got to become global citizens. You've got to watch MTV and drink Coke and watch Hollywood films. That's a bad thing for the Russian soul, a very good thing for American commerce.
Goodbye, our red flag. Now you're just a narrow red stripe in our Russian tricolor, in the innocent hands of whiteness, in the innocent hands of blue. You, our red flag, lay in a puddle in a flea market. Some hustlers sell you for hard currency, dollars, francs, yen. But I caress red flag, and I cry.
Many Americans cried. I've seen one American, and he was crying. He said, it's a beautiful poem. It's touched me. And I asked you, why? Could you explain me why? Why poem about the red flag, about the collapse of Soviet Union, touched you so deeply? And he said, you know, Mr. Tushenko, you underestimate your own poem. This is not so political poem. It's a human poem. This is a poem about broken dream. And you know what I feel, Mr. Tushenko? That our American dream, it's also broken.
For a while, it does seem as if America's dreams have died, but capitalism hasn't. Coke responds to the country's malaise with perhaps its most effective commercial ever.
The world to sing with me.
As America recovers from the war in Vietnam, an aging Robert Woodruff convalesces at his plantation in Georgia. After nearly a century of success, his most prized and guarded secret is being tampered with. Coca-Cola's sacred formula is about to be altered.
It was a bottler in Dallas, Texas, who had put together these very rough videotape commercials.
And which was it you preferred? Yeah, my guess, Pepsi.
We saw this videotape and said, this is what we need.
Commercial after commercial started running in Dallas. This disease started spreading carefully across this thirsty land.
What was your choice?
Coca-Cola went ballistic, and they didn't know what to do about it, so they made some very silly commercials.
Come from a big city, don't you, boy?
Yes, I do.
Thought so. You got one of them skinny little big city mouths.
Now, look here.
Let me tell you something. You can't tell nothing from no test like this. Give me that bottle of Coke. I'll show you how we drink them down here. We don't sit around in no fancy bars, take a little bitty sip. You can't come down here flam-flamming honest people. You got to watch what you do down here, boy.
One of the things that they did, which no one knew at the time, was they conducted their own blind taste tests. And they were horrified to find that Pepsi actually did beat Coke a little bit more than half the time in these blind taste tests. And they thought, this can't be. I mean, for a company like Coca-Cola, which has this huge pride, we are the best. You know, there's no question that Coca-Cola is superior to this upstart, this pipsqueak, Pepsi. For them to find that these blind taste tests revealed this was really shocking. And so they started to play around with the formula.
As Coca-Cola enters its 100th year, we know of no better way to thank the billions of consumers who have made Coca-Cola what it is than to give them a Coca-Cola that is better than ever.
Introducing the new taste of Coca-Cola. In this country, the best have a way of getting better, and Coke just did. From today, there's a new taste, a new standard against which colas will be judged.
Coke is me. Management of this company honestly and truly reveres our consumers, more than we revere a century-old formula. I've never been as confident about a decision as I am about the one we're announcing today.
Well, today, Coke announced a new real thing, a change in its formula. And as Mike Jensen reports, Pepsi said baloney.
Pepsi is giving its employees the day off to celebrate. Pepsi says by today's action, Coke has admitted that it's not the real thing.
Coca-Cola drinkers of America, thank you for participating.
Please don't change the taste of Coke. When you want to fix it, it ain't broke.
They can't do it. That's un-American because we fought wars to have a choice, to have freedom.
They changed my Coke.
Something wrong with it?
I know, but they sure changed it.
Coulda asked.
What coulda? I stuck with them through 3 wars and a couple of dust storms, but this is too much. Guess something big made them change.
Right big.
Right big.
Soon after the formula is changed, the boss stops eating. As Robert Woodruff dies, an era comes to an end. For 60 years, Woodruff has led a company that sold the American dream. Now, he leaves the new bosses to answer the protests of an incensed American public.
Let me read you a few letters. Here's one that starts, Dear Chief Dodo. Well, I passed that along to Roberto unopened, but he told me what it said. What ignoramus decided to change the formula of Coke? The new formula is unexciting and it's as bad as Pepsi. Burn it. Here's a letter from California. I don't think I'd be more upset if you were to burn the flag in our front yard. Now, there's one consumer that we'd like to single out. He's Mr. Gay Mullins of Seattle, Washington. And I want him to know that the first case of Coca-Cola Classic will be hand-delivered to him in appreciation for his message.
What a treasure. Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Yeah, y'all, come on. From the Red River Valley to Reading, PA, red, white, and blue, all across the USA. The Red Sox in Boston, Jazz in New Orleans, Santa Claus at Christmas wearing your old blue jeans. There's a feeling in this country, the real thing's coming through. Coca-Cola Classic, red, white, and blue.
What we have seen in the last few years is truly an amazing change with the end of the Cold War. Vastly symbolic of this was the moment in November of 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell. Coca-Cola was right there giving away free 6-packs and 12-packs. And what you've seen since then is like a blitzkrieg of capitalism. And Coca-Cola has led the way.
3 years after Berlin, the blitzkrieg moves on. Just as Coke and Pepsi once competed for Germany and Russia, the cola wars now target the next untapped market. Bombs and bullets didn't win the war in Vietnam, but cola might.
We introduced Pepsi to Vietnam 2 hours after President Clinton lifted the embargo. And 2 hours and 1 minute later, Vietnamese all over Ho Chi Minh City were slugging down Pepsi and saying, if this is what America's about, this is pretty good to me.
We talked in Vietnam about winning the hearts and souls of men. The cola wars are only about the hearts and souls of men. And what they know is that if you win the hearts and souls of men by fabricating needs and persuading people they must have the products you sell, you win a war much more permanently and with much more conviction than if you simply occupy a town or occupy a country.
In this, the season of giving, the gift of freedom is the greatest gift of all. A message from the Pepsi-Cola Company.